How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, be they simple or complicated, be they left wing or right wing. So, whatever your questions might be, throw them in the chat, leave your comments and your questions in the chat, and we will get to answering them. This is not a debate show. This is not a show where people yell at each other and call each other names and try to prove that one person is smarter than the other. I do not believe that debates are productive. And so we will not be doing any of that here on this show. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, something in the middle or something on the outskirts, you are welcome here. So long as you're asking questions in good faith, you'll get a good faith answer. Good morning to you too, Triska. Thank you for being here. And to everybody else, welcome. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics. Simple or complicated, there's no such thing as a dumb question. I don't believe in making fun of people for trying to learn new things or trying to expand their worldview. So, whatever question you have, you don't got to worry about getting roasted or debated or made fun of here on the live stream. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics. You can ask about something general or something specific about American politics, and I'll do my best to give you as objective of an answer as any human being can muster. I can't claim to know everything, but you have the benefit of all of my knowledge. If I can answer it, I will. So go ahead and throw your questions and your comments in the chat, and we will get to answering them. Everybody is welcome here, whether you agree with me politically or not. You can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, you can be something in the middle or something on the outskirts. There is no question that is too far to the left or too far to the right. So long as you're asking in good faith, you will be getting a good faith answer. Mumbling Fez says, did everyone forget about the Epstein files already? I do not believe that anybody has forgotten about the Epstein files. Galder says, how is Charlie Kirk? I believe still passed away. Zad says, my close friends are leftists and are saying they won't vote for anyone who's funded by APAC. So I think that it's actually kind of a reasonable thing to say. I think that you need to kind of amend that philosophy based on if it's the primary election or the general election. If it's the general election, you're basically picking between, and both candidates are funded by APAC. You're picking between a Republican who's funded by APAC and a Democrat that's funded by APAC. It's still better to vote for the Democrat. Evil Commie Scum says, why is no one asking when is Charlie Kirk? That's very funny. Fletch Lives Again says, release the Trump Stein files. That's very funny. Podcast Politics says, are you a Democrat or Republican? I'm a Democrat. Zad says, do I say to them? Can you finish that question? Muzzy says, how has Netanyahu not been arrested yet? So the ICC, which is the criminal court that has indicted Netanyahu, has no jurisdiction in America or Israel. And I believe he probably has some sort of like agreement with other world leaders if he goes to countries that do enforce ICC laws. So, nice to see you as well, Beaverino. TikTok motherfucker says chances that we aren't being misled with Mitch McConnell. I think that even if he's still alive, even if he's not in a vegetative state, I think that we are still being misled about Mitch McConnell's health situation. Captain Sinbad says, how come Biden didn't release the Epstein files? Well, Biden was not in charge of the Epstein files. The Biden administration separated the DOJ and the FBI from the White House, which is what you're supposed to do. So if you want to know why the head of the FBI at the time, who was a Republican named Christopher Wray, who was appointed by Donald Trump, didn't release the Epstein files, then you're going to have to ask Republican Trump appointee Christopher Wray. I should also mention that Ro Khanna and a bunch of other Democrats made attempts to release the Epstein files in 2019, 2020, and 2023. Captain Sinbad. So this is not a bipartisan issue. Democrats have been trying to release this. Republicans have been blocking it. And Republicans are currently blocking it. Mumbling Fez says Mitch is knocking on the pearly gates anyways. No arguments here. FS says, how can I come to USA green card? Is just, look, this is not fair. I don't know what America's current pathway to citizenship is, FS, but unless you are rich and white, it doesn't look good right now. Mika George says Mitch is dead. They just don't want an election and to lose the majority. Maybe, I don't have any confident information that he is either alive or dead. We really have a Schrodinger's senator situation on our hands. And until we get any kind of evidence, Mitch McConnell is both alive and dead, and in a vegetative state, and in a coma. And he's paralyzed. Jorge says, "How do you fund social programs without taxing the middle class? Because the 1% rich is not enough." I disagree with that. I think that you can get everything that you need for funding social programs comes from taxing the rich. Now, we're not taxing the middle class. We just have to tax the rich more than we tax the middle class. We have to lower taxes on the poor, the working class, and the middle class, and raise them on the rich. Okay, Schrodinger's Mitch HZA says, "Would you explain capitalism and socialism?" Yeah, a bunch of different people will have a bunch of different definitions for that, but I'll do my best. Sharkspear, Barry Lane, and Triska, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. So, capitalism is basically let the free market decide. Companies will either exist or not exist depending on how good their products are and how good their pricing is, and every problem can be solved that way. Socialism is where the government runs those industries. So instead of having private healthcare, you'd have government run insurance instead. That is the simplest way you can explain those two different economic philosophies. User a whole bunch of numbers says Ray was a turncoat, demon rats, and rhinos reference, or Ray would help them just well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm just gonna go ahead and block you right now. Okay, Mardus Ross says, "What's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican? I'm not from the USA." There's a lot of differences. Madras Ross, can you give me an issue, and I will tell you how Democrats and Republicans differ on that issue. Our Pale Horse says, "Rich white people wouldn't be immigrating to the U.S. All the white folks are there or in a better off." Yeah, I mean, Trump tried to import a bunch of white South Afrikaners, and they decided to go back because they were like, "Yeah, this country sucks." Shork said, their words, not mine. Shork says, "Should the state of Oklahoma be removed from the union?" No. This person says, "Are you a liberal or a conservative?" I would call myself a progressive Democrat. Marta says, "Just the way they differ generally, why are they different parties?" I mean, so there's a lot of differences, Mardras. The shortest way that I can explain the difference is that Republicans believe that in a thing called trickle down economics, where you give rich people a lot of money and then that'll heat up the economy and everybody will get a lot of money. And then Democrats believe that that is not a good thing, and they believe in taxing the rich and then using that money to help everybody else. David Nitu says, "Why Britain in the 80s fights with Argentina just for the Falklands?" I have no idea. 8 whole bags of corn says, "Should Florida become its own country?" Probably not. Lexi says, "What's your ops on Restore?" Big old thumbs down on Restore. Big old thumbs down on Reform. Big old thumbs down on Nigel Farage. Big old thumbs down on the Tories. Mama Shell says, "When is the Blanche vote?" I believe the hearing is today. I'm not sure when the vote happens. Buffalo Jack says, "Bro, doing anything but getting a job." I do have a job. I get paid a lot of money to service your mother. Vicarious says, "Thoughts on Tallarico?" Big fan of Tallarico. He's great. Texas, everybody in Texas should vote for Tallarico to be their senator. Lexi says, "What's the safest party for women?" Probably the Greens or Labor or Liberal Democrats. All right, Sharkspear says, "LOL, I saw you perform live." Oh, where'd you see me? What city or state was I in? Weather Dog says, "Thoughts on the housing market and if we should cut rates because I make good money and it's hard to buy." We should not cut interest rates because when you cut interest rates, you increase inflation. And right now, inflation is on the rise thanks to the very not smart economic policies by the Trump administration. Mel says, "Will Blanche get confirmed?" Nobody knows that to be sure. There are some people, some Republican senators are hypothetically against them. It's possible that they could eke it out with JD Vance casting the tie vote. It's not a sure thing, but it's also definitely not dead in the water, which is a shame because no reasonable, serious politician should be confirming Todd Blanche. That's a non-starter. Like everybody who votes for Todd Blanche should lose their job immediately. If you are living in a state with a Republican senator who votes to confirm Todd Blanche, you need to dedicate your life to making sure that person gets replaced with a Democrat. Okay, Weather Dog says, "How does cutting rates increase inflation?" I mean, do you really care, Weather Dog? I don't think you do. Hessam says, "How far is Iran from a nuke?" Probably months, maybe a year. Oliver says, thoughts on liberal Democrats in the UK? Don't know anything about them. Sharkspear says, right on, Todd Blanche. Thank you, Sharkspear, but where did you see me perform? Oliver, I did that one already. Dave Ferguson says, there is no more democracy. There won't be a Democrat in office. That is inaccurate, Dave Ferguson. You're in question jail. Ask a question or leave. Weather Dog says, it was a genuine question. I don't know. Okay, so the reason why lowering interest rates increases inflation is because when you lower interest rates, you are effectively making borrowing money really cheap. And so, ergo, people tend to borrow a lot of money to try to start new businesses or more often than not do stock buybacks. And that extra money being kind of like in the system makes everything more expensive because there is more capital to spread around. So once that money starts getting spent by people that have a lot of money, suddenly people can pay a lot more for the things that people normally wouldn't pay a lot for. Okay, Tom Budd says, how do we get MAGA to listen to facts? So I would recommend a book to you, Tom Buds. It's called The Persuaders by Anand Giridharadas. If you go to my Discord, link is in the bio. There will be a link to that book, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. Just go to my Discord, and all the books are there. Breaking through to people who getting through to people who generally vote for Trump or Republicans in general. It's difficult, but it is possible. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to do a lot more listening than talking. Ecuadorian, great to see you again. Average Joe, great to see you again. Farouk says, who is your best politician? I like Chris Murphy, senator from Kentucky. Not Kentucky's Connecticut. I'm tired, guys. Rough couple of days with the baby. Okay. Sharksburg says, I saw you in Stroudsburg, PA. God, I don't even remember when that must have been forever ago, Sharkspear. All right, Movement Remastered says, liberals are the main issue with our country. That is not true, no matter what country you're in. Thomas Smith says, why are you not a communist? I guess I believe in a mixed economic model. I think that we should have employee-owned companies, but I also don't think that the government should tell people what their jobs are allowed to be. User says, in my house, we love Jesus Christ and Donald Trump. I'm just going to go ahead and block that person now because that's not a question. Yolosis says, are you a social democrat? Yeah, I mean, depending on how you define it, yeah. It's Masha says, why is DSA on the rise? DSA candidates tend to be further to the left than more sort of like centrist Democrats. More centrist Democrats tend to be either dragging their feet or dogmatically against things that people generally want the Democratic Party to do, like focus on economic populism, stop sending money to Israel, universal health care, raising taxes on the rich, stuff like that. And so, yeah. And so, as people are recognizing that Republicans are not going to do that, they want to vote for people who are going to do that. And so, yeah, even if you are not a corporate Democrat, not being a DSA Democrat can make it seem as though you are not going to work hard to stop sending money to Israel, to raise taxes on the wealthy, to move towards universal health care, things like that. Sue Deep asks, are you a Zionist? It depends how you define Zionism. Yolosa says, should there be an age limit in Congress? I think so. Curry Mandrew says, does the Republican Party is like something exclusive to the USA? Yes. Patrick Lalong says, not just Israel, most countries we should not be sending money. I mean, I disagree with that. I think it's really valuable to have foreign aid, Patrick. But I think that there's a bunch of reasons why Israel is an exception to that. All right. Farouk says, what is the difference between free healthcare and universal healthcare? There really is no difference. They're kind of used interchangeably. I tend not to say free healthcare because then people assume that we're not paying for it at all, as opposed to paying for it with our tax dollars. But if you pay for it with our tax dollars, we end up spending a lot less. So people kind of generally view that as better. Okay, Patrick Long says we need universal healthcare and free college. Completely agree with that. Ecuadorian says, Jarrett, why don't we do what the Joker said? Because I don't think that we should be lionizing murderers. All right, Chaos Born says we can't say free healthcare because people are stupid, so we have to be specific. No comments. Sue Deep says, do you support Israeli expansion and settler colonialism? No, I do not support that at all. Duradino says, would no countries be a perfect society? I mean, I don't think that any country is perfect, but there are definitely better countries and worse countries. Sorry, better governments and worse governments. Every country and its citizenry are equally as good as every other country. A Table says, "Why do we do nothing about world peace?" I mean, I'm doing tons for world peace. I'm trying to get people to vote for politicians that won't start wars. Vegas Light says, "Is Trump good for America?" No, not good for America, not good for anybody. Somebody whose name I can't read says, "Why are you ignoring my question?" Because I didn't see it. Homo sapien says, "Should we return to an agrarian society?" Probably not. Dave Ferguson says, "Why did the Democrat Party get arrested?" I do not believe that the Democrat Party did get arrested. What are you referring to? Okay, the one and only says, "So how do we get out of this shit show?" So that's a big question that requires a long answer. The one and only. The way that we get out of this is we have to recognize what our strengths are as citizens, because the billionaire class own everything. They have all the resources. They are able to manipulate all of our spheres of information to get us to believe whatever they want. So the only way that we can fight against that is to do shit in person and as individuals. So every single one of us needs to be deputized to be a messenger for voting every single Republican out of office. From president to dog catcher, no Republican should be able to keep their job because they are enabling all this shit that's happening right now. This is not happening in a vacuum. We still do hypothetically have checks and balances, but the Republican Party is just allowing all of this illegal, barbaric, corrupt shit to happen. So they should all lose their jobs, and it is up to us to make sure that the people that we know in our lives, our neighbors, our friends, our family, our coworkers, etc., they all know what's going on and are planning on voting accordingly. So I call that the work. There's a bunch of different ways to do the work. If you want to do the work with me, but you don't know where to go or how to start, send me a message. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Or just go to my Discord channel because I got all the information over there. Triska, Barry Lane, Sarah, and Mia, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Suicide Buff says, "Your position on Israel and Gaza." I am for the citizens of both of those regions. I'm against the governing bodies of both of those regions. I believe that because Israel is the more powerful nation that is actually, annexing territory, it is their responsibility to be the peace bringers. It is not their responsibility to escalate tensions. If you are the more powerful military, it is your job to de-escalate. Gnome says, "Why do you support sending Israel defensive weapons such as Iron Dome?" I don't know if I do support that because money is fungible. So I don't want them. I don't want to send them money for defensive weapons and then have them actually use that on offensive weapons. Ulosis says we should abolish the electoral college. We're actually really close to doing that, Ulosis. Ask me how. He says, "Who does Epstein work for?" I'm pretty sure he worked for himself. Living Legend says Palestine doesn't have a military. I mean, yeah, but they do have terrorists that kind of operate as their military. Homo sapien says, "Do you believe in Mongolian supremacy?" No. Wildberry Skittle says, "You support a free Palestine?" Yes. Carl says, "Don't speak to him, guys. He's a Democrat pretending to be neutral to pull you from the Republican Party." So that's not true, Carl, and also that's not a question. Michelle says, "I support Israel." All right, good for you. Living Legend says, "No, not anywhere close to that." What does that mean? Living Legend. All right, sure, if you say so. Ulosa says, "Jim Tellerico has a lot of potential." Completely agree with that. Willie says, "Trump is just a goon ball." No arguments here. Danny is terrible says, "I've never been so terrified in my own country. The stuff coming out of Maine is shocking." Yeah, it's really awful. And it's important to recognize that every single Republican politician is allowing this to happen. So the way we get out of this is voting out of office every single Republican. Wildberry Skittle says, "How are we close to abolishing the Electoral College?" Thank you for your question, Wildberry. So there's this thing called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I'm going to say that again for anybody who wants to Google that. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Basically, what this is the Electoral College. Every state gets to decide what to do with their electoral votes. What the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact says is that us, the state of whatever, California, Nebraska, whatever, we agree that we are going to give our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. And if enough states agree to do that, then the electoral college is basically done. Because it doesn't matter who wins what state at that point. If the person who wins the popular vote gets all the electoral votes of all those states that decided to do that, that person becomes president. And we are, we would need to get more than 270 electoral votes in order for that to happen. And we currently have 267 states that have signed up, electoral votes represented by states have signed up to be part of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So I'm just going to read off a couple of states here. This is not a comprehensive list of states that have not yet signed up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, but just a couple. So if you live in Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, or New Hampshire, then you should call your representatives and tell them, hey, I want us to sign up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact and get rid of the Electoral College. I'm pretty sure that, with the exception of New Hampshire, if one of those states signed up for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, Electoral College is gone. Is done. Pretty cool, don't you think? Log says, do you have a theory as why Articles 2 and 3 are getting seemingly stronger while Article 1 is weaker? I don't. Short version is the people in power are the ones that enforce those articles. And right now, the Republican Party is in power, and they would prefer Article 2 and Article 3 to be way more important than Article 1. Herculus Pompous says, would you make Chechnya? I don't know anything about that. Willie says, would abolishing the electoral vote have to be confirmed by Congress? No, it's completely up to the states. Danny is terrible says, do you believe any Dems share blame for the stuff happening with ICE? Short answer, no. Longer answer, yes, but the Democratic Party is doing the work to try to rein in ICE. Some Democrats believe that it is politically damaging to vote against that. And so they have voted for funding, basically, or voting for a funding bill that includes ICE funding in it. But no, I do not believe that that implicates the Democratic Party in that. It's like they're the party that's not in power right now, and ergo they have to make a lot of really tough decisions. I think that if there was a primary vote and I had a choice between a Democrat who made the hard choice and voted to not fund ICE or voted to abolish ICE, or a Democrat who was in a tricky situation and voted to fund ICE, I would vote for the former. But if the latter won, I would still vote for them in the general, because again, this is the Republicans' fault. Okay, Jack Berserk says, if you wear this during the day, what do you wear at night? LOL. Well, one of the nice things about working from home is that I get to wear my PJs. Jose Mato says, does Israel control U.S. Congress because of money or what? Israel does not control U.S. Congress, but Israel has a lot of influence over Congress because of a bunch of different reasons. It is complicated, Jose. JJ says, why would a Jew vote for a Democrat? JJ, I'm assuming by your question that you are not Jewish, and so please don't say Jew like that, because it can be used as a pejorative, and I do not care for that. Let's see here. Duradino says, will Democrats win the 2028 election? Nobody knows that, but I would just say, if you want that to happen, do the work. Somebody with no screen name or picture says, is Israel commenting genocide? Color me skeptical that this is a real person. Stop spamming. I'm answering your question. Stop spamming. AVR says, because Dems are anti-Nazi. Yes, that is accurate, AV8R. So yeah, what is Israel committing a genocide? I'm not an expert, but I do listen to experts, and every expert is saying yes, that they are. Even independent organizations located within Israel have concluded that Israel is doing a genocide. So they're doing a genocide, case closed. Sarah, Triska, and Liam, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. And that means that it is finger hearts o'clock, the best part of every day. Finger hearts o'clock. Let's get back into these comments. Karen Jackson says, are you a Democrat? Yes. Jack Berserk says, read that book. What book? Godless Gratitude says, and now they are doing one in Lebanon. Potentially, I don't know. Lorenzo V says, weapons to other countries, weapons in them. Don't know what that means. Crumble Funk says, thoughts on this upcoming primetime TV speech? I kind of agree with AOC that networks should not air it. Basically, what Trump is going to be doing is spreading a bunch of lies about how he won the 2020 election, and then he's going to try to make a bunch of declarations about how he's going to be, stopping voter fraud in 2026, which is actually going to be a cover for him trying to take people's right to vote away, especially if you are a Democratic voter. He basically going to say every Democratic vote that is cast in 2026 is fake and fraudulent, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to stop it from happening. Don't worry. And they're going to do a bunch of illegal shit probably to try to make that happen. And so everybody should be on the phone with their state and local reps to make sure that we have plans in place to stop them from doing that. All right. Godless Gratitude says he's going to fail again from your lips to God's ears. Spy Natural says something going on between America and Serbia right now. I do not know. Jack Berserk says dinosaurs were here first. That is accurate. Abigail says, do you agree with social democrat policies? Yes. Yes, I do. If you're asking me which politicians are my politicians, it's the ones that would describe themselves as democratic socialists. So Mamdani, AOC, Bernie Sanders, James Tallarico, John Ossoff, Elizabeth Warren, etc. CS says he's going to jail again and this time staying there? Question mark. Who are we referring to? I choose the other path says, what do we do when he is successful in his plans to disrupt the midterms? So first of all, let's not be doomerist. You could say, what do we do if he is successful in his plans to disrupt the midterm? Because one of the tools that authoritarians use is us assuming that they are all powerful and will be successful. So the game is not over. We decide whether or not he is successful or not. So if we, the people, do the work that we need to be doing of organizing and protesting and striking and putting political pressure on our representatives and business leaders, of convincing people to vote for Democrats in such large margins that whatever rigging they try is unsuccessful. If none of that happens and Trump is successful, I don't know what to tell you, my guy. Like, we just have to keep on doing the work, only now it's going to be harder. Okay, Anonymous Morat says, LOL, liberals aren't going to strike. That's too disruptive. I mean, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. Okay, Georgia says, what's the difference between socialism and communism? A lot of people will give you different answers for this, but this is how I think about it. Socialism is when the government does things for us. So, like, universal healthcare is called socialized medicine because that would be like a socialism version of healthcare, where right now we have a capitalism version of healthcare. And communism is workers owning the means of production. So any company that's owned by the employees, like Bob's Red Mill or Publix grocery store, is communism. All right, XH says choose between Clinton and FDR. I'll probably go FDR, but I'm not going to die on that mountain. Indy says to say the cheaters of the Republicans proves the host has been brainwashed by the mainstream media. So your syntax is terrible and you're saying things that are inaccurate. Mao Razuli says, what's your definition of genocide? My definition of genocide is when people that study genocide, independent organizations that are professionals at figuring out what genocides are, when they say something's a genocide, then it's a genocide. Okay. Alex says, nothing will change if you vote Democrat. You are still going to be sending your money to Israel. So that is a wildly inaccurate thing that you have just said, Alex. I don't know if you're still here, but if you would like me to explain why what you just said was inaccurate, I'll happily do that. AV8R says the military, post office, police departments, fire departments, parks, all socialized programs. That is 100% accurate. Bitar says, what's your stance on abortion? I am pro-choice, but even if you are pro-life, you should still vote for the Democratic Party because Democratic politicians and their platform actually decrease abortions. Republican platform does not decrease abortions. It actually increases accidental pregnancies and increases people that cannot afford to have kids. In addition, it makes pregnancy much more dangerous for women. So vote for Democrats if you want fewer abortions. Okay, Yolasa says, why not support the Green Party? I'm not in the UK, so my view of the Green Party has little influence at all. XH says, give me a right winger that you admire. I don't know any current right wingers, but some former right wingers. I like the dude over at the Bulwark. What's his name? Tim Miller. Okay, Yono Hey Ho says, how do police get money? Taxes. Okay, so I just got reported for unverified claims. This is what people on the right like to do. They like to report me for nonsense reasons to try to shut me up. But it's not going to work. Okay, Fogger World Production says, your thoughts on aborting Down syndrome pregnancies? That feels really gross to me. I'm open to it. I think it can be an individual's decision. I think if you are if you know that you are going to have a child with some kind of disability, then you're not only deciding to abort the baby because you don't want your life to be harder, you're also deciding that you don't want that child's life to be harder. Obviously, a person can have a very rich and full life if they have any sort of disability, be it Down syndrome or autism or missing limbs or whatever. But are you are you okay with making that choice for them? Are you okay with signing that person up for a life that is arguably going to be way harder than somebody else's? Now, I think that should be allowed to make that choice for themselves. But I hear you, Fog of War. Like, I understand why it's a murky area. TikTok ref says, "Yeah, death is better than life." Holy shit! I mean, maybe. Have you ever been like in so much pain that you've begged for death? TikTok. If not, wow, what a privileged life you must have led. Daniel says, "Who do you want to run in 2028?" I would love it if Chris Murphy ran. I think he's great. Coach Abadiala says, "Hi, do you believe that USA funds ISIS?" I don't, but I could be wrong about that. Okay. Machine Right says, "Well, can I speak as a person who was a potential abortion?" Sure. I mean, you're supposed to just be asking questions, but whatever. Arbak Vardayan says, "Please don't ignore me." I won't. If you put a question, I'll read it if I see it. Hono Heiho says, "How can my job pay me if they don't make money?" I guess they can't. Okay, XH says, "Give me a Republican president that you like." I mean, if you're asking me for a Republican president after the parties switched, then that's difficult for me because they're all pretty terrible. They're just like different scales of terrible. Like Nixon was terrible, but he created the EPA. Reagan was terrible, but he said that immigrants are the lifeblood of America. George W. Bush was terrible, but he told people not to demonize Muslims after 9/11. So, like, they're all bad, but they have better things than the current one. Gabagool says parties never switch. That is wildly inaccurate, Gabagool. Let me know if you would like me to tell you why. Yono Hey Who says, "I'm not Muslim. What do you mean? Did I say you were Muslim?" Funkytron says, "Do you believe we are mere puppets of the establishment status quo? And so are they to their masters?" No, I do not believe so. This is theoretically a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But when the people don't go out there and vote and exercise their rights, then sometimes billionaires are allowed to buy elections and hack the government for their own nefarious purposes. 2028 says, "Thoughts on NVIDIA offering to make homeowners mini data centers?" I would be extremely skeptical of that. I don't know if I would do that. All right. Arbeck says, "Gosh, that's not a question." Riverboat Ron says, "Will the Epstein class of politicians and donors ever be persecuted?" If we vote all of the Republicans out of office and replace them with Democrats, then yes. But the more Republicans that there are in office, the less the chances there will be of any accountability for the people that did crimes with Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, Coach says, "How do you see Iran war?" I see it is very terrible. Bittar says, "Modern day feminism, good or bad?" Good. All feminism is good. Feminism is just the radical belief that women should not be trodden upon, that they should be allowed to have credit cards and jobs. Okay, let's see here. Daniel Rosario says, "Elon Musk fixing our national debt, understood he himself our problem and quit." No, he made the problem worse because he doesn't really give a shit about the details. He just wanted to get a whole bunch of subsidies for his companies, and he wanted to shut down agencies that were investigating him. AV8R says, "And fly helicopters like I did for 20 years." I don't know what the first part of that sentence was. Mohammed asks, "Why are monopolies stopped? Isn't that against the essence of capitalism for an open market? Why regulate?" So monopolies need to be stopped because if you are going to have a free market, you need competition in order to stop that monopoly from raising prices whenever they want, paying their employees as little as they want. If you have a monopoly, you have unfettered power, and unfettered power is a recipe for disaster. So what you need is competition in the marketplace. All right, GRK says Democrats had a chance to release the Epstein files. They tried, but Republicans stopped them. GRK, would you like me to go into more detail? Yono says, "Is Trump a feminist?" No, he's the opposite of a feminist. He is a misogynist. Scrub Lord says, "Was there illegal interference in the 2024 election?" I have not seen any hard data that there was scrub lord. I am interested in seeing how things turn out with the Rockland case. I believe that we are still getting information out of that, even though the case was kind of like thrown out of court on procedural grounds. But yeah, as far as I know, there's been no direct evidence of election fraud. Okay, Yolosa says, to be fair, Trump's first term was solid. That is inaccurate. I don't know if you remember, but Trump allowed a dangerous pandemic to run rampant all over the globe, killing something like 100,000 Americans. I can't remember if it was 100,000 Americans or 100,000 more Americans than if he had just done that smartly. He did a whole bunch of corruption. He did a whole bunch of really terrible statecraft. Like the reason why there is so much global instability right now is largely because of mistakes that Trump made during his first term. And also, he tried to overthrow the government on January 6th. So, yeah, no, his first term was not solid. Thank you, Mia. It was 1 million Americans dead, 100,000 more than would have died. XH says, I don't like all of progressive and higher taxes. I mean, I think you should, XH, unless you're a billionaire. Okay, let's see here. TikTok motherfucker says, Trump freed 5,000 Middle East terrorists from prison. I believe that is accurate. Okay, Godless Gratitude says, Trump is the predator of the century. Accurate. Fog of War says, what about Eisenhower? He's easily a top 3 POTUS of the 20th century. Eisenhower was pre the party switching, right? Fog of War, I believe that I believe that I was like, we're talking about post switch happening. Alrighty. Funkytron says both parties are bought and sold, though. That's the issue. Funkytron, that is inaccurate. Would you like me to go into more detail on that, Funkytron? Because to say that both parties are bought and sold equally is wildly inaccurate. Please ask me to expand on that. It is my favorite thing to talk about. Jonathan Krause over on YouTube says, do you have the courage to state, do you have the courage to say who won the 2020 election and be honest? Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Boy, oh boy, what a tough question. Okay, let's see here. Funkytron says, as an independent, I believe status quo establishment is harmful interim of who they represent, not us. Funkytron, you are in question jail. Unless you ask me a question, or more specifically, you ask me why you are wrong to say that both parties are equally bought and sold, then I'm going to have to boot you. CS says, should we just let people who want free market live in free market, but they get zero programs? I mean, what are you talking about? Are you talking about just get out of the country? I don't know. It seems like not the best solution, because you could say this on either side, where it's like, America, love it or leave it. If you don't like what Trump is doing, get out. Or, if you don't like progressive social programs and billionaires getting taxed, then you guys should leave. Like, I don't know. It's all our house. If you're born here, this is your home. I don't think anybody should be forced to leave. Alrighty, let's see here. GRK says media is making ICE look bad because Obama did the same thing. Obama did not do the same thing, GRK, and media is not making ICE look bad. ICE is making ICE look bad. Marwan says, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I'm a Democrat. Yono says, I don't understand why all the hate against ICE. ICE is behaving illegally and barbarically. They are detaining people illegally. They are treating them in awful. They're detaining them in detention centers where they are being fed food that is expired and riddled with maggots. They are not giving them proper medical care. There is credible reporting, that there is SAing and murder happening in these detention centers. They are detaining illegally people who are here legally, veterans and Native Americans and citizens and green card holders, in addition to protesters that they're murdering, like Alex Preddy and Renee Goods. Yeah, there is nothing nice to say about ICE. 312MQ says, unless you live under a rock, how do you not know the hate on ICE? You have to remember, 312, that some of these people in my chat are not real people. So we just have to kind of remember that and keep our heads about us. Okay, Yono says it's frozen water. Not in America. In America, ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they are a paramilitary organization that the president is using like his own personal Gestapo. Riverboat Ron says, "Do you agree that America provoked Russia to invade Ukraine?" No, I do not. Riverboat Ron, not. How did we do that? How do we force another country to invade a different country? You know, XH says there are illegal. I don't know what that means. Do you mean Jews? That's usually what the two parentheses means. XH. Okay, Rback says TikTok bans my question. Gosh. Well, try to phrase it in a way that doesn't get banned. Funkytron says, "Do you really believe politicians truly represent us, not billionaire, then foreign lobby on top of that?" I believe that some politicians truly represent us and not the billionaires, Funkytron, and that those politicians are almost universally in the Democratic Party, Funkytron. Please ask me to go into more details, Funkytron. I am begging you to ask me to prove this. This is the argument that I am the most well prepared for. Okay, Yono says, "Do you do this for fun or do you get paid?" I don't do this for fun. I do get some donations from people. This is for anybody who's watching. If you support what I do and you want to send me money, you can. There are mechanisms by which you can do that. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You could be a super fan or a fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. You can join my Patreon, etc. I don't do this for fun. I do this because there are a lot of people in America who do not have the proper attention on politics right now. They do not have an appropriate understanding of where to get good news. They do not have an appropriate understanding of which politicians are doing good work to try to help them and the people that they love. And so I am on here to try to encourage people to be a part of the process, to inform more people, to get more people involved, to point people in the right direction for how they can be a part of the solution because it needs to get done by somebody, and so I'm gonna do it. I don't have a lot of Aries like qualities. I am an Aries, but one of my Aries like qualities, if I see a job that needs doing and nobody does it, then I do it. Okay, Funkytron says, "Tell me more." Of course, I lean and often side with Democrats, but I have not chained to the party. Okay, Funkytron, let's get into it. So, if we are looking at every Democratic versus Republican administration since Reagan, we see a trend. Every Republican administration cuts taxes for the wealthy. Every Democratic administration raises taxes on the wealthy. Now, unfortunately, the Democrats have been hamstrung by Republicans or more centrist Democrats. So we've never been able to raise taxes on the wealthy by as much as they were lowered by the previous administration. So we have had corporate and billionaire taxes going kind of like this, and then the Democrats raise it a little, and then the Republicans lower it a lot more, and et cetera, et cetera. If you look at donations to the political parties, Republican politicians get upwards of 75% of all billionaire political donations. Why would they do that unless the Republican Party was more in their pocket than the Democratic Party? The Democratic Party's platform is to regulate giant businesses and tax their owners. The Republican policies are the opposite. There are more billionaires in Trump's cabinet than any president in history. If you're looking for the policies to get money out of politics, it's in the Democrats' platform. If you're looking at the policies that have injected more money into politics, it is the Republicans' platform. If you look at the Supreme Court cases that have caused more money to be flooding into our political system, they were all decided on by judges appointed by right-wing politicians. Or they straight up were the entire case. Like Ted Cruz versus the United States is a Supreme Court decision that made it so that bribery and corruption is better and more legal and easier to do. Funkytron. All right, so there's the long and short of it, my guy. The Republican Party is the party of the billionaire class. The Democratic Party is the party of the people. The Democratic Party has a history of legislating on behalf of the people, making their jobs better. Maybe they haven't been aggressively anti-billionaire and anti-giant corporation as you've wanted them to be, but their governing history is littered with examples of this shit, and I'm happy to go into more detail on that as well, because this is the game, guys. This is the whole fucking point. The reason why you believe that the Democratic Party is worse than it is, the reason why you believe the Republican Party is better than it is, the reason why we cannot raise the bar high enough for Democrats or lower it lower enough for Republicans, the reason why Democrats never get any credit and Republicans never get any blame, the reason why the billionaires want to own all the channels of information, be it social media or mainstream media or whatever, is because of this fundamental problem. They want you to elect Republicans so they can be richer and have fewer laws that they have to adhere to to the point where they're just the new kings and queens and we're their serf wage slaves, fucking tilling their fields for them, and they can hunt us for sport with zero accountability while they're fucking eating lobster and caviar 3 fucking meals a day on their private jets, flying from their giant mega yachts to their giant mega mansions. That's the entire fucking game right there. So stop doing it. Stop voting for politicians who are just going to give the billionaire class more power. All right, end of rap. Mundos says the Democratic Party is also shitty. LOL. They still mandate billionaires. That is inaccurate. Mundos. Would you like me to tell you a bunch of things the Democratic Party has done that the billionaires have hated and have worked really hard to stop? Because I'm happy to go into that. Tovari says, bro is goy raging. Well, seeing as how my last name is Berenstein, that's inaccurate. Okay, let's see here. Jonathan Krause says, also, do you have the courage to say who won the 1920 election? The courage, just not the information, my friend, Jonathan Krause. All right, Mundo says, nobody denies that Democrats regulate. Yeah, regulate, sure, but they still exist as a class and still exploit workers. That is a wild thing to say, Mundos. You're saying, yeah, they passed laws that help the working class, but they still exploit workers. Like, what are you talking? I need to take things down a little bit. Me and the missus are having a little rough couple of days with the baby not sleeping when she should be sleeping, so my patience is very limited. But the things you're saying, Mundos, are wrong. I could be nicer about it in the future, but when I just do 10 solid straight minutes of well articulated explaining how this is the difference between the two political parties, and if you want the billionaire class not to own our ass forever and not to be able to poison us with the chemical runoff from their factories and not to be driving around in fucking Bugattis while we can't afford healthcare or food or gas or whatever, you should vote for Democrats, to then come back and go, yeah, well, the Democrats are also kind of bad. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, my guy? All right, we're doing meditation, yoga, Zen yoga, Zen yoga. Okay. All right, we're back, everybody. Alrighty. Tom says Trump killed trade. That is accurate. Mason Hunt says thoughts on USAID. I am for it. All right. The fact that Donald Trump and Elon Musk killed USAID means that I think somewhere upwards of 1 million people have died because of that. So they are murderers. Georgia says Dems care about healthcare and starvation. I mean, we do care about healthcare and putting food on the table. I think that's what you meant, Georgia. Okay, Vomit says, please answer the question about your preferences on the hot sauce. I like Cholula. Kumar says, Senator Graham was happy about Ayatollah's death. Now people celebrate Graham's death. I don't think there's anything inaccurate there. Mason Hunt says, what's up, Jarrett? What's up with you, Mason Hunt? Meerkat says, are half measures enough when the system has been smashed? I mean, you're kind of saying a bunch of different things there, Meerkat. But yeah, half measures are enough. You know that you can get basically where you need to go if you do enough half measures. Like, arguably, the only reason why we are able to touch surfaces is because of half measures. If anybody is into theoretical physics, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody ever see the movie IQ with Tim Robbins and was it Melanie Griffith? I can't remember who the girl was in that. Okay, Godless Gratitude says, say what you want about Biden. He was forcing regulations on these corporations to protect the people. That's right. And first president to ever walk a picket line. That ain't nothing. Kelly says, when will this Trump shit show end? It will end when we, the people, do the work of unelecting every Republican from president to dog catcher. Mason Hunt says, my parents worked for USAID and got laid off because of Trump and Elon dumb Republicans. Completely accurate, Mason Hunt. Alrighty, let's see here. All right, well, I guess my little Republican versus Democrats rants, really cleared up a lot of questions. So now we have a dearth of questions at the moment. All right, Fletch lives again says, was there any truth to the Biden crime family, or just fake news? Completely fake news. It is true to say that Hunter Biden has broken a lot of laws. It is true to say that Hunter Biden exploited his last name to try to get jobs that he was not qualified for. But it is inaccurate to say that the Bidens are a crime family. It is inaccurate to say that Biden ever used his office for profit. It is inaccurate to say that Hunter was ever a part of the Biden administration. Yeah, it is complete and utter nonsense. Funkytron says, I mostly often side with Democrats, but we vote third party in the past led to them questioning me, just had bad conversations with people. I don't really understand what you're saying there, Funkytron, but what do you think about the rant that I just did? Do you have any feedback for me? Are you hearing the things that I'm saying? Have I convinced you that Democrats are way better on this issue? Ryan says, is the left versus right fight a scheme to keep us divided? It is if you're talking about getting the voters to fight amongst themselves. It's not if you're trying to figure out who to vote for, because there is a difference between left-wing politicians and right-wing politicians, but we, the people, should not be fighting amongst ourselves. If my enemy is not a Republican voter, their enemy is not a Democratic voter. My enemy is not a corporate centrist Democrat voter. Their enemy is not me. But my enemy is Republican politicians. Okay, let's see here. Uperlar, great to see you again, says, will he set the tone for stealing the election in November with a speech on Thursday? He is 100% going to try to do that, Uperlar. Alrighty. Mateo says, I am not American and I want to ask you, you support Trump or no? I do not support Trump. Kurt says, will America make a claim on Greenland? Probably not, Care, but you really can't put anything past the Trump administration because they are wildly corrupt, wildly incompetent, childish, and part of their whole fucking thing is we do what we want. And so, yeah, I don't think that they're going to do it. I think that there are too many people in the military who are unwilling to do that. But I also thought there would be too many people in the military unwilling to just like unilaterally murder people in the ocean off the coast of Venezuela or invade Venezuela to kidnap their president, So yeah, I'm not saying it's completely impossible. I just don't think it's going to happen. Okay. Chili Willy, Sarah, and Triska, thank you so much for helping me reach my first Finger Hearts goal of the day. And now we're going on to our second Finger Hearts goal of the day. Fox X says, do you like Thomas Massie? He's okay for a Republican, but he is still a Republican. Ryan says, are politics driven by reason or irrational emotion? It depends on who you're talking to. For me, it's driven by reason, but for many people, it's driven by irrational emotion. John Franco says, do you see Congress changing the law so Trump can run for office for a third term? No. That does not mean that he won't try. That does not mean that they won't try. But I do not believe that they will be successful in that. Dave says, when was the last time the divide was so large between left and right? There have definitely been aggressively partisan times in America's history in the past. So I would not say that this is an anomaly. It sucks that we have to live through it, but we've definitely had hard, divisive times in the past as well. Tanya Reyes says, how is the government and Trump getting away with all the corruption? Is our political system broken? The reason why Trump and the government are getting away with the corruption is because they are in the hands of the Republican Party. And the Republican Party does not give a shit about enforcing the laws. They only give a shit about their own power and money. And so because Trump is valuable to them, they are not going to prosecute him. Yeah, end of story. Ryan says, what are some conspiracy theories you secretly believe in? Only one, that RFK Jr. doesn't really sound like that. Joey says, how do you feel about Mamdani left out many immigrants off the NYC immigrant map, including my people? I haven't heard anything about that, Joey. I am suspicious that it even did happen because I feel like maybe you often come in here with misinformation, whether you are intending to do that or not. And if that is something that happened, I don't imagine that that's something that Mamdani wanted to do. So it's possible that it was just an oversight. Randy Barber says, has there ever been a USA leader creating this large of a divide? As somebody who is not a real student of history, I hesitate to say yes or no. I have a hard time believing that we ever had a president who was this divisive. And when I say divisive, I don't mean that people had contrary opinions about, but that was a president that was literally using his platform to divide people, to make people hate each other more. That is what Donald Trump is doing. Wisconsin West says, we were very unified back in the early 2000s. When did the division start? So I don't have a conclusive answer for you, Wisconsin West, but I can tell you this. I can tell you that ever since Reagan eliminated the Fairness Doctrine, the billionaire class has been pouring their money into creating media to divide the nation and to convince people that the Democratic Party and Democratic voters are bad. When Barack Obama got elected, the billionaire class lost their fucking mind. And they were like, oh no, we're going to get taxed. We're going to get fucked. And then they kind of like put things into hyperdrive as far as their divide and conquer strategy. Because in addition to trying to stop Obama's, quote unquote socialist agenda, they also recognized that there were a bunch of hardcore racists that would be really easy to convince that Barack Obama was a really terrible president and person, and that they could get on board with this project, and they were extremely successful in doing that. Okay, Jacob Walter says, nothing you have said is true. I would say that almost everything that I have said is true, Jacob, including the fact that you are currently blocked. Actually, so I feel like it started slowly with Obama, but wasn't Obama's fault, escalated with Trump. Yeah, it again, the billionaire class has been doing this. They put it into overdrive when Obama got elected. Right, Randy Barber says that division is what Hitler did. Trump is living Mein Kampf. No arguments here. CS says, what is your definition of DEI? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is my definition of DEI. CX Lewis, is that not everybody's? Okay, Ask Left says the foreskin class. What a weird thing to say. Ryan says, how do you feel about Putin's overall character and action so far regarding his nation? Cannot say enough negative things about Putin. He is a criminal. He is a war criminal. He is a murderer. He is an oligarch. He has stolen money from his own country and put it into his own pocket. Bad guy. James Foster says, does Palestine have a right to defend itself? Every nation has a right to defend itself. All right. C.S. Lewis says, no, that is not the definition of DEI. All right. Well, what do you think the definition is, CX? Okay. I am losing my voice. And also, the questions are slowing down. So we're going to start wrapping things up. Get in your final questions. CX Lewis, let me know what your definition of DEI is. If you want to support the show, you can. There are lots of ways to do that. You can like, you can share, you can tell all your friends how great my live stream is. You can send money. You can send gifts on TikTok. You can send bits on Twitch. You can be a subscriber on TikTok. You can be a super fan on TikTok. You can be a subscriber on Twitch. Additionally, if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free. Costs you $0, helps me out a ton. So I'd really appreciate it if you did that. And also, you can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, though there is a very fun incentive at $10 if you can afford it and you want that kind of thing. Shoot me a message if you want to shoot me a message. You don't have to be shy about it. I want to be here to help you be more informed about politics, be more involved in politics. So however I can do that, go ahead and shoot me a message. It's not going to bother me one bit if you do. So DMs are open. You can email me through my website, or you can hit me up on my Discord channel. Link for all that shit is in the bio. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Yeah. And I'm tired, so I'm gonna get out of here, everybody. Yeah, CX never got back to me about what they believe DEI is. So be good to each other, be good to yourselves, and I will see you guys here tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.